I still got plans that I never spoke. A lot of rhymes that I never wrote. A lot of dreams that I never lived. But if I think about it, then I mean I really did. Just not yet. I used to wish that I was here now. Smooth sailing on my own boat. I'm about to jump up on another plane. Right before I take another toke. It's all love. If you here, you done been through it. It's your business if you into it. If it ain't mine, I ain't into it. So I don't care what you meddling. You can say what you peddling, cause niggas ain't easily influenced. I'm about to take another long drive, cause it helped me get a clear mind. So while you staring at your watch, I'll be looking at the sun. Yeah, I'm moving on real.
Good afternoon, New Haven. You're listening to Cannabis Corner on WNHHLP 103.5 FM. Broadcasting live from downtown New Haven. We're streaming live on TuneIn Radio and newhavenindependent.org. We're also streaming live on video, Facebook Live. Just go to facebook.com, New Haven Independent. Just go to your Facebook page, look us up, and then check See First, and you'll always see the great programming that we have here on WNHHLP. Anyway, so today is Monday, the 23rd of April, and I'm in here in the studio right now just waiting for my co-host. Apparently there were some parking difficulties, but everything's fine here because it's a good day. It's beautiful out. And it's a good day to talk about marijuana legalization. We just had 420 come up last Friday. It was a big day. Everybody was out celebrating cannabis all over the country. I know that Kebra was down in Washington doing her thing with a big rally that was going on down there, big festival. And I was part of a party in Waterbury, and I know Uncle Lou did something up in Massachusetts. So I had a real great time on 420, and also I attended a big event in Massachusetts on Saturday called Extravaganza, which was all about cannabis legalization. There were a lot of vendors there and a lot of bands. It was a real good time. So we had a good time up there, and I saw a lot of people that we know who are going to be at our conference on May 5th. And you know, Cushley was there, and the Healing Rose, and One Hit Wonder, and a lot of the people that we know from Connecticut were up there vending, and it was a really, really, really good time. Smoke was in the air. So anyway, what I wanted to bring up first, and I see Kebra just walked in. I know she had to just freshen up, so she'll be in a minute, and I know Lou will be up in a minute. But what we're going to talk about first, we have a couple of good guests on. I just wanted to let people know who's going to be calling in today, just so you know. It will be, we have attorney Aaron Romano. He's going to call in about 20 after this afternoon. And then we also have Representative Melissa Gibran. She's going to be speaking about how we can get this legalization bill voted on. That's what we're going to be asking her about. So we have two really, really good guests. I don't want to get too deep into the conversation because I'm waiting for my co-host to be here. But I do want to let people know that the legalization bill that is up for a vote is locked and loaded and ready to go. It's on the calendar. It has a file number, which means at any time between now and May the 9th that the Connecticut legislature can vote on this bill. So that means they have a ton, they have about a lot of bills up for vote, and some of them they're not even going to bring up for vote, and some of them they are because it's a short session. Well, what the legislatures are trying to do right now is they would rather vote on tolls than vote on legal cannabis. There was an article last week we spoke about, and nothing's really changed up there since that. They still are dead set on voting for tolls and not voting on cannabis at all. So, in other words, they don't want to vote no. They don't. It's not that they don't want to legalize it. It's just that they don't want to vote on it. So, because they're afraid it won't pass, pretty much. So, what we got to do? Oh, good. Here's everybody. All right. Kebra and Lou, welcome.
Hey, Joe. Hey, Joe. Hey, Joe. Sorry about that.
That's all right. It's all right. Yep. Radio is, 1 o'clock. Got to get the show must go on.
That's exactly right. And we have Joe, and he's absolutely awesome.
Kebra literally just got off the road from Washington, like I was talking about. She went down to Washington for 420, and I'm sure she's going to have some stuff to talk about with that. And I was telling everybody about who's calling in, what we're going to talk a little bit about. So I wanted to get right into it. I was explaining a little bit about what's going on upstate with the legislature, which is pretty much nothing.
Yep.
They passed the bill through committee. They've got it ready to go on the calendar. They can vote on it any time between now and May 9th. They're choosing not to.
Yep. They're choosing not to right now.
And they're choosing to vote on tolls instead. Because we discussed this already. Nothing's really changed.
Right.
What?
And those representatives, like we were talking about last time, we were looking to focus on those Democratic representatives. And you know what? I follow online the Dab and Dad series, and I guess right on his website he has an article for each and every representative.
Oh, yeah.
Which is pretty impressive. So if that's something that you're looking to do and you want to make sure your representative is somebody who you need to notify and say, hey, we are looking for adult use recreational cannabis, vote yes. Make sure that they know that their constituents want this. If 71% of the polls are saying, hey, we want adult use cannabis for recreational use, then why not go there,
Right. Exactly right. And this is what the legislators need to realize, that the people want legalized cannabis more than they want tolls.
Yes.
And for them to feel like that tolls are going to pass and this is going to be the resolution to all their economic woes. It's going to take tolls 5 years to get in, even if they do pass it.
And
they can get cannabis done in 1, maybe 2.
Easily. And within 2 years, they can have a full licensure program and full revenue generating model. Even with that, Massachusetts numbers just came out about tolls. How much out-of-state toll money is not collected at all? So you're looking at an even bigger deficit there. They're looking at almost $500,000 not collected. So
and now, what's funny? Who's not paying those tolls? Those out-of-staters that they think that they're going to get by putting tolls in. You know how they always say, we're going to get them out-of-state people. Yep. Well, the out-of-staters get those things in the mail with their license plate, and they just throw it out. They don't pay it. Yep. Those are the people who aren't paying the tolls, is the out-of-staters.
That's right.
So tell me, is it going to...
How many jobs versus...
None.
will be created.
None.
This is only electronic polling. Yeah, so no jobs will be created.
Only the construction jobs, and they're temporary. Once those things are constructed, you're right. No new jobs.
Where if you open up the entire adult use cannabis industry, you're talking jobs for everybody all over the place, from bare bottom to the CEO level, from construction to security to
hemp,
anything. Agricultural. You'll see a huge boom in agricultural communities that need something. They need a new crop for them to harvest, And,
these people, these representatives, and I have the list here, and if you look at them, we've gone through this many, many times. They're from areas that tend to have a little more money in them. And they're afraid that they are going to... they're afraid that their voters are going to turn against them if they vote for cannabis.
Cities like Orange because Orange is one of them.
Hold on. We have a call.
A call.
Beautiful. Available now. If you're still looking for affordable health insurance.
I think that was a spam call, my friend. I think screening. Anyway, yes.
I know that Aaron Romano's supposed to be calling.
He is, but not soon. But you never know. So we're looking right. We got Milford Orange, Gail Schlossberg. She's the big offender. She's a big-time senator who's retiring and figures like she might as well just go out voting no and yes on tolls, which is foolish because she doesn't care about getting reelected. You got Fox from Stanford.
So that's when she should really step out and
just
go,
do it.
Yeah, do the right thing.
Go out.
Go out with a bang.
Yeah, that's right.
Or a bong.
Because I'm going to tell you.
Go out with a bong.
Well, I say bowls, not tolls. That's the new thing.
Okay.
Bowls, not
tolls.
Bowls, not tolls. That's what we got to tell these legislators.
Yes.
Because let me tell you, come November, when people are starting to look at the voting records of these representatives and deciding who they're going to vote for, what would you rather see? You voted yes on tolls and voted no on weed, or voted no on tolls and yes on weed? Who would you be more inclined to vote for?
Oh, I'm looking for the guy that has my interests at heart, in all honesty. So if it
we know 71%
yeah,
is their interest, right?
Yeah.
So by voting yes on weed, you pretty much got 71% of the people behind you.
You really, in all honesty, depending on your marketplace and where you're at, you can up your constituents just by aligning with cannabis. In all honesty, without you may not even have to take the most extremist stance.
Right.
You can take a
I'm okay if it's done right.
Right.
You know what I mean? I'd have to see the regulations. There's ways these politicians can talk.
Yeah.
And a lot of these people keep quiet. They don't say what they're going to vote until it actually comes down to it.
And then they just vote, and then they don't say anything. And it could be a yes, and you never know. You know what I mean? It could be somebody who doesn't want the idea that, hey, I'm a big supporter of the proponent of adult use, recreational use, but I just won't say anything. I'll abstain from the conversation
until it comes time.
And then when it comes to the vote, I'll vote yes, knowing that it'll draw business to my town. It'll open up that little boom. Hey,
yeah,
but that's why
as long as you vote yes, I don't
that,
care if you say it or not.
That's why it's important that their constituents come out of the closet and out of the darkness and into the marvelous green light.
That's right.
And help people help their legislators know, like, this is really what we want, and then tell legislators why. Give people reasons and talk about the children that cannabis helps, and the access and the importance of growing that economy so that we can offset the cost for the children and for so we can do some things for community rebuilding. You worried about misuse or abuse? Well, if we put this people are consuming cannabis right now, and it's not legal to consume as an adult
state
here.
Isn't
if you're
making
not
any money.
Yeah, the state's not making any money, but moreover, people are consuming.
They are still
God
consuming,
knows what.
yeah.
Dirty cannabis.
So we need to educate. So this is. I just don't understand the desire not to legalize here.
Politics.
Because it just really doesn't make sense.
It's politics.
You're saying it's for public safety reasons why you're not, but it's actually the exact opposite.
Right.
In this way, we'd have a regulated market that we'd be able to control, use where people are using it. We'd be able to hone in on making this a responsible industry. And because of the lack of regulation, because of the lack of legalization, is why there are potential for issues.
That's why there is issues.
Do you
exactly
know
right.
Do you know how many times we drive down the road and we see these abandoned buildings with all broken out windows in these industrial cities here in Connecticut? You can take any of the mill-style cities that we have here, the mill towns that have all these.
Turn them into anything.
Dispensaries,
grow houses,
education areas. Imagine an old paper mill turned
and
into.
then also use the money to turn them into community centers.
Exactly. That's exactly where I was going. Imagine having an old mill turned into a community center, which has now water access that's paid for by adult use cannabis.
Right.
Because the neighbors to this community center are adult use cannabis businesses that have the reinvestment of 15% into their community.
Right.
And think of your what's a local I drive through, was that 34 Ansonia Derby area?
Oh yeah. And how many Bridgeport?
Yeah.
How many buildings right there of Golden Hill? They used to be beautiful.
Oh, you're so right with that, man.
Right. Bridgeport is one place that could really use it. Like you said,
Ganem,
the Valley.
I'd love to talk to you. It's about that
Ganem's
money.
All for it, man.
We'll take that Main Street and turn it Green Street if you need to, my friend.
So here's what, we're lucky enough to have a representative actually be calling in, and it's one of the few Republicans who supports this. Now, what we've been going towards is all of the Democrats who are voting no.
Right.
Why don't we talk to this representative and say, hey, listen, we know most of the Republicans are voting no on tolls. Why don't you get a few of your constituents to come in and vote yes on weed? Then we don't need those damn Democrats. Those 7 or 8 Democrats that are holding out.
I get you.
We should talk to her about that, how we can get more Repubs on our side.
I think that she's being very active about it. I've had the honor of actually getting to speak with her. Kebra introduced me. We were standing there, and she was saying how much she's working and how hard it is. She's very vocal. I believe she signed.
She was on the committee.
Exactly.
She led that committee. The committee that passed it, she was one of the people on it.
So she's very vocal, super vocal, which she's also said has hurt her in some way. So she is taking the heat on both ends, and it's something that we can commend.
Absolutely.
And her reasonings are for economic development, job creation. She has put in the time and effort to study and research why she's for. So this will be really
That'll be an interesting conversation.
yeah,
I'm very
a
glad
good
we got it.
conversation and talking about stepping across the aisle. And,
It is stepping
not
across,
doing something that's so popular, which is what this is what it's all about. This industry is creating
balls, man.
people, helping people become advocates and really being able to stand up for what's right and their rights and what they believe in.
I do believe she's trying to step up to state senator. I think so.
I believe so.
I believe so. So maybe
Which is a big push. She's really for some. If
she'd like to get this done.
Could you imagine how many advisors are telling her, "Hey, don't be so public about this. Don't." And she's really doing it. So we have to say, even she's a Republican, but she's really fighting the fight, man.
But this could be a new way to look at it because look, John Boehner just came out and started supporting it.
It's a big thing.
It's a big thing. Kebra says it's not that popular, but the funny thing is it's not that popular amongst the government. But amongst the people, it's popular.
Oh my gosh. You should have seen the National Cannabis Festival.
Oh, yes. You were just down there. Let us know.
Thousands and thousands and thousands of people there. They were expecting 11,000. I'm pretty sure they surpassed that.
Wow.
And it was so the first day, so Friday on 4/20, it was actually the National Cannabis Policy Summit. And so we spent the day, just hearing. It was live on C-SPAN as well. So we spent the day just talking to different experts in the industry about how to move this industry forward. There were some Washington, D.C. specific issues, but overall, that was a great day. And then I actually got to spend the afternoon at National Holistic Dispensary.
Hello.
Oh, our call is in.
Our call is in? Okay. So we'll talk about that a little later.
Okay. Who do we got on the line here?
Hey, this is Aaron Romano. How you guys doing?
Aaron Romano.
Hello,
How are you, my friend? Aaron Romano.
Listen, I have a quick question.
Yes.
Yeah.
How come no one uses the word kind anymore?
Kind?
I just don't hear it anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah. The kind. It just fell off. It just fell off from common usage.
This is true. This is true. So,
I think we gotta
Aaron,
bring it back.
bring it back. Aaron, you are the legal counsel for Connecticut NORML, but you also do a lot more out there in the community and the legal community as well. Could you just tell us real briefly about, your background, what you're doing out there for cannabis?
Sure. So I'm a lifetime member of the NORML Legal Committee. So as all of you listeners will probably know, NORML is a national organization for reform of marijuana laws. And it's been in existence since 1972, and it is America's premier lobbyist group to legalize and regulate cannabis within the United States. I believe there might be branches abroad as well. But there's a bunch of lawyers got together who are members of NORML, and we specialize in litigation on cannabis issues, whether or not it's in the illicit market and is defending people who are accused of committing criminal acts, or it's in the licit market and it's assisting businesses thrive and start in the cannabis industry. So I've been involved with that for about 8 years now, since I started my practice in Connecticut, but I've been a lawyer for close to 20 years and doing mostly defense work and working with people who are charged with cannabis offenses.
Wow. Now, what made you want to get and be cannabis specific? What made you want to specialize in cannabis cases and all that? What prompted you?
Well, let me just say this. It dates back to high school.
Okay, so you saw, and this is leading into another question, because I know what made me want to really become active and start fighting the fight was the fact that all of the injustice that was done in the name of prohibition. I really found out what the history of of prohibition was. And when I realized the amount of injustice and the greed that was involved in the racist, all the overtones that they were using, I realized that all those people back there were scammed.
Oh, yeah.
And it was a terrible way to do this, and there was really no scientific background to what they ever did, and they just used a lot of propaganda and their money to make cannabis illegal, really, in order to get hemp illegal. And that's what made me.
Yeah. And Aaron, you just did a presentation at a NORML event, and you really dove into that. So you want to talk a little bit about cannabis prohibition history?
Right. Well, I'm handling a case right now in Connecticut courts. It's State versus William Bradley. It's currently pending in the Middlesex Judicial District, in the Middletown Courthouse. We're expecting a decision on May 1st. And what I'm doing is I'm challenging Connecticut's cannabis prohibition laws. You said, Joe, there's an element of prohibition that was involved with trying to ban hemp because of the paper industry. But I explore more of the racist origins behind cannabis prohibition. And basically, what I uncovered in my research, and as many of you do know, is that cannabis prohibition was merely a proxy for a war against minorities.
Mm-hmm.
So when you take a look at history and you take a look at when Jim Crow laws existed, Jim Crow laws existed after the Civil War. These were laws that were enacted by states and the federal government to a degree, or mostly states, to prevent black people from participating fully in society, so disenfranchise them. Typical Jim Crow laws were literacy laws in order to vote, or other types of laws that prohibited essentially black people from being able to vote. Cannabis prohibition was essentially taking a law and criminalizing behavior that Mexicans and black folk at the time were engaging in. It was unregulated. Cannabis was unregulated up until the 1930s, and there were no problems. No one was complaining about
a medicine.
Mass murders. No one was complaining about all the propaganda that you began to hear about in the 1930s. It is propaganda because it was false. They were false reports being made about people smoking cannabis and then all of a sudden going crazy and killing their entire family. I mean, it just
I always said that the American public didn't even know cannabis could be used recreationally. They thought it was a medicine until the government told them they could. I mean,
right. Well, let's specify that, Joe, because back then it wasn't the American public; it was the white establishment. Mm-hmm. And so the white establishment, generally, they did not use cannabis recreationally. They didn't even know what it was. And so when Harry Anslinger, in his campaign to make cannabis illegal, came out and said there's this drug, it's being used by these evil people, it's creating ideas of racial equality, it's trying to create ideas of social justice. He was complaining that communist ideas came out of smoking cannabis as well, that it posed a threat to the white establishment. And we've seen how strong that kind of race mongering is, because we see this last election, how that was played upon by our president.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So we see, I mean, history repeats itself. If you don't understand what is going on, you're doomed to repeat it. And what I did is I uncovered Connecticut's link to federal prohibition and Harry Anslinger. I went to the law library and I pulled the legislative history for Connecticut and Connecticut's cannabis prohibition, and we have representatives acknowledging that Connecticut's cannabis prohibition laws are a product of Harry Anslinger. And so once we acknowledge that it is a product of Harry Anslinger, and Harry Anslinger had this racist agenda to pass a cannabis prohibition, now we have that link for the state court, and it should be overturned. Right. But let me clarify this, okay? That proxy for a war against minorities meant that police then had another, or the white establishment, the police who were working for the white establishment, had another tool within which to arrest Mexicans and blacks and charge them with an offense that would disenfranchise them, that would result in them not being able to vote. And since whites were not using cannabis, generally, the whites were drinking, this posed a greater threat to the minority community, and its intent was to disenfranchise them, to deny them the right to vote and participate in the political process.
Right, because once they were criminals, they weren't allowed to vote.
That's it.
Yeah,
Once you're
and that's
convicted
still
felon,
carried
done.
on up until recently. They allowed felons to vote. Is that not true? I mean, felons were banned from voting for a long time. Correct?
Well, each state has its own laws with
Right.
respect to that. Some states allow felons to vote as long as they're not on parole, and some you have to apply for reinstatement of those rights. It just depends on the state you're in. In Connecticut, if you're a felon, you can vote.
Yeah. No, I know Connecticut has progressive rights like that. So this was the first time they enlisted prohibition. What about the what happened in the 70s with Richard Nixon when he really ramped things up with the DEA? What the motivation behind that was the same, wasn't it?
Well, you know what? It's like a different name. It's just the same prohibition. All they did was change they created a Controlled Substance Act, but pretty much it was just an extension of the earlier act. But I know what you're getting at, Joe. You're talking about Nixon's assistant who acknowledged that this was a war against hippies and progressive people who had progressive political ideas,
like the Black Panther,
black folks.
Yeah, well, those were the two groups that were giving him trouble back then. You had the anti-war protesters, the hippies, and then you had the Black Panthers, the civil rights movement. And he said, well, the one thing they have in common is drugs, so we're going to really crack down on drugs and start putting these people in jail, disenfranchising them exactly the same way they did back in the 1930s. So, I mean, it's the same formula, just updated.
And when you see laws that are affecting communities disparately, when you see that laws are affecting the black community or the Hispanic community differently, more aggressively than the white community, you have to ask yourself ultimately, what was the purpose for passing this law? I mean, I think we can all agree that robbery should be illegal, right?
Yeah. Right.
We can all agree burglary and theft. Those are acts that should be illegal. But it's interesting because drug offenses are really offenses where someone is exercising a basic human right to alter their consciousness. It's been done for thousands of years, ever since the dawn of humanity. People have been, eating mushrooms and doing whatever they, eating other plants without detrimental effects to society. There are some theories that actually using hallucinogenics advanced society, created new ways of looking at things. The stick was no longer a stick. The stick now became a tool. So I'm not, in no way am I saying go out, eat some mushrooms, and look at a stick and use it as a tool. But what I'm just suggesting is there are certain laws that criminalize natural behaviors and behaviors that for thousands of years had been accepted and actually encouraged in society. I mean, we all know, those of us who've done this research, we know that there were shamans and priests and people who were leaders in communities, and they used different plants and products that grew on the earth to go ahead and open people's minds. And it was encouraged. It was part of society, as opposed to throwing the shaman in jail or expelling the shaman.
Yes.
It wasn't until the Puritans, actually, if you think about the Salem witch trials, it wasn't until then that things kind of were taking a different turn.
Yeah, Western religion.
Yeah.
And then
like
it's so
the shaman.
obvious with the whole, with the change in view of drug abuse now with the opioid crisis.
Oh, yeah.
It's so obvious that when a certain population is affected, then one way
jump.
it's criminal, the other way is healthcare.
Yeah, let's help them.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Once it affects, the white community. And, it reminds me of a movie that really hasn't gotten much press from years ago. I don't know if any of you saw it. It's called White Man's Burden.
I have seen that.
I believe I saw that as well. Many years
with
ago.
John Travolta, years ago, right? 20 years ago, maybe.
Yep.
And the premise of the movie is white people are the minority and black people are the majority. And so John Travolta, I think, is part of a white family, which is actually the minority family. And then you see how he suffers at the hands of it would be black oppression, And I think the movie they changed the roles so that white audiences could look at this and then experience what a day in the life of someone who's black, who is experiencing oppression, what that would be like. And without literally putting yourself in someone else's shoes, how do you really know what they're experiencing?
Mm-hmm.
That's very profound, too. Do you remember the old the book back in the 60s? I think they made it into a movie, Black Like Me.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yep. That was a journalist who took some tanning pills.
Mm-hmm.
Pigmentation, injected it, yeah.
Yep. He shaved his head, took some tanning pills, and then he toured the South. I think he hitchhiked in the South and wrote about his experiences. He was a white guy. Wrote about his experiences being perceived as black. But this is something that it's interesting because the cannabis legalization is bringing to the surface these issues of race, inequality, and I
think it can help solve them too by using the money that is generated by cannabis legalization to reinvest into these communities that were affected and these, the people that have been disserviced by these laws. And
not even just reinvest, but also to be able to create entrepreneurs. I mean, this is projected to be hundreds of billions of dollars of an industry in the next 10, 20 years.
Right.
And so if there are hundreds of billions of dollars and people of color are afforded the opportunity to get into the industry, then we'll be creating more people of color who are millionaires and who have thriving businesses and who can, really change because at the end of the day, all of this is about money. Period. Point blank. It's all about the Benjamins. And so without financial power, we don't really have any power. And I keep bringing everybody, they want to talk about, police brutality and things of that nature and down to the criminalization of this plant. And the bottom line is that it wouldn't happen if we yielded a certain amount of power that we don't. And so instead of, thinking of new ways to march and protest, we need to be thinking of new ways to shift the economy a little bit and obtain some power.
Speaking of march and protest, go ahead.
Kebra, I know you've been doing a lot of work organizing in the black community, and there's one thing I learned. It's kind of an irony. If you study the support of legalization in Washington D.C., and Washington D.C. We know is a very black city.
Mm-hmm.
Aside from the politicians there, I mean, there are songs about it too. But the opposition to legalization was strongest among the black community.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely.
And so there's, and it dates back. My theory is that it dates back to prohibition, because if you have folks like Harry Anslinger making this an issue about race and beginning to program people to associate cannabis with black people. Cannabis is evil. Cannabis is used by black people. The association is made. And of course, if you're black, you want to distance yourself from that.
Mm-hmm.
And so through generations, I think in the black community, people have resisted this idea that this is something that could be beneficial because of prohibition through generations and the propaganda and programming. And so it's an uphill battle to educate communities and tell them, hey, this is something that's okay. It's not going to kill you, and it's something that could be good for the community.
Mm-hmm. That's our biggest problem as people of color. We've been conditioned to be in the condition that we are in, and the economics, that all these things. And so you kind of like understand, okay, we've been conditioned, but now the jig is up, the secret's out. We know what was being done. And so we have to fight against it and change the conversation, change the narrative a bit. So Aaron, Representative Gibran is calling, I believe, right now. But do you have any? We're gonna let her. You have any final words and tell people how we can reach you?
We should let her in real
you
quick.
can reach me in Bloomfield, Connecticut. You can Google me, Aaron Romano, just like the cheese.
Okay.
But there's one thing I wanted to ask you, Kebra, once I get off the phone, and at some point, if I'm white, how do I talk about these issues with someone who's black, without it being offensive, what is the best way to be able to talk about these issues in an open and honest and respectful way, because there is so much history behind it?
I think the biggest problem is a lot of times when we start to have these conversations, there's a level of assumption, and I think there's more listening that needs to occur than talking. when just to really understand, because it's difficult to explain to someone like why we're so concerned with color, or why, some things of that nature. So we do have to go though, because Ron is in, but we do have to go. But we would love to talk to you again. We can't wait to see you at the conference May 5th, and we're really excited. So we'll have you back. Right. We'll have you call in again, Aaron, so we can finish this conversation. Love you too.
Thanks, Aaron. Thanks for calling in.
Bye.
Okay, bye.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Okay. So did we get her all straight? You didn't pick up when I handed you.
All right.
Oh.
All right, you guys, we got to keep going on the show. Right. You guys get the Gibran back on. All right.
What's our calendar look like?
Well, yeah, why don't we talk about some events, because we'll probably finish up the show with her.
Yep.
So the calendar looking pretty good for this month, right?
We've got her on the line, I believe.
Okay, let's get her in. Keep on letting you take the lead on this. Hello. Who do we have on the line here?
Hello.
Is this Representative Gibran?
Yes. Hey, Kebra. I just called your other line because I wanted to make sure I was able to get in. So I'm glad I tried it one more time. I'm here.
I'm so glad you did. Thank you. How are you today?
You're welcome. I'm doing pretty well. How about you guys?
We're good, thank you. So I'm going to just read some history and some information about you today. We have calling in Melissa Gibran. She's the current state representative for the 34th District of the state of Connecticut House of Reps. She represents East Hampton, East Haddam, and parts of Colchester. And you've been in office since 2012, huh?
Yeah, I was elected in November of 2012 and took my oath of office in January of 2013.
And are you originally from the East Haddam area?
I am. I actually grew up in East Hampton, went to elementary, secondary school there, moved to Moodus, East Haddam when I was a teenager, and graduated from Nathan Hale Ray High School, which is the high school for East Haddam. So I've lived in the district really my whole life.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, we are so happy to have you calling in today. And we just wanted to, talk to you a little bit about where we stand with the bill and we thank you so much for all the hard work you've been doing. First of all, we want to say up in Hartford, changing minds and changing the narrative about cannabis legalization and what it could mean for our state. So we thank you for all the hard work that you and the Appropriations Committee did. And so I know that there's been some talk about things not going forward. So if we could talk a little bit about what made you decide to support cannabis legalization here in the state, and then what has happened since your decision to support, and then now where we are.
Okay, well, so my decision, as you probably recall, is not new. I've been a long time proponent. In fact, the very first bill I did in the House back in 2013 was starting with trying to get industrial hemp to be recognized as a commodity in Connecticut. And so I was the first Republican to submit a bill for legalization of marijuana a few years ago, and continue to talk to my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to kind of break the stigma about cannabis and legalization of marijuana. This year, I worked extremely closely with Representative Tony Walker to actually get it out of the very first committee ever in Connecticut. That was a bipartisan effort. It could not have happened without Republican support. And so, we are now kind of in a new a new place that it finally came out of committee. Where it's going now, kind of goes beyond Tony and I to our leadership, and I really hope that it gets a vetting on the chamber floor, and the majority party has the authority, the legal authority to call bills. That's the majority's prerogative. So it really rests with the Speaker of the House, which is Representative Joe Arisomowicz.
So it's not out of the question that it could still be voted on at this point?
Listen, I learned a long time ago that nothing is dead in Hartford until sine die, which is the technical term for gaveling out of session. That will happen on midnight, May 9th. The worst thing I learned when I became a legislator was this term called a strike-all amendment. And so if somebody found a bill and they wanted to do a strike-all amendment, they could put in new language, and we could be debating that at the Capitol. So I wouldn't say that nothing's going to happen. I think I've seen a lot of unusual occurrences here. A lot of things can happen very late in the game. So we'll know for sure by the time we adjourn, which is May 9th.
Melissa, can I ask you a question? Us as activists, what can we do to move along the process, and what would you recommend as a strategy? In other words, we know there are a certain amount of Democrats who are holding out and voting no, and if the Democrats had everybody, that it would Simowicz would probably feel confident enough to bring it to the floor for a vote. Is there any way we can reach across to the other side of the aisle and try to get some Republicans to make up that gap that the Democrats seem to have there, that gap of the few votes that they lack? Can we get that from the Republican side now that we seem to see a little more support from the Republican Party on a national level?
What I can tell you is, frankly, the Speaker is not going to call a bill unless he has the votes, and because of the political reality, I think that it's really focusing on the Speaker to call the bill, and that's there's no way that some of my more conservative Republicans are going to support a bill that that is still being negotiated or worked on behind the scenes, and that's part of the problem, frankly, with any bill, because what happens is again, that strike-all amendment, the idea that you could have language before you that's totally brand new and has not gone through kind of that process where it's been the actual language debated on by the committee. Because you got to remember, the appropriations bill is a study. It doesn't legalize marijuana.
Right.
So, you have to, if you want to actually legalize marijuana this year, it's going to have to be new language that's crafted. The bill that came out of the Appropriations Committee was a study which would allow DCP and others to create regulations to be submitted to the legislature for review.
For October 1st, right?
That's right.
Now, isn't that similar to the tolls bill, where the tolls bill just calls for a study?
Yeah, and so, but the problem is, again, there's a lot of legislators who've been in this building for a long time who know that things change very rapidly. And so without having an opportunity to see language, I don't think, the toll bill, I don't see that being successful either unless people have the opportunity to see language ahead of time.
But yet he feels confident enough to call that for a vote.
Listen, I don't know what he's calling for a vote.
Right, nobody knows
I'm
yet.
in the minority, remember? I have no idea what the bill will look like that the Speaker may be working on and getting ready to call. That's part of for me being in the minority, I don't have the opportunity to be involved in that kind of language development because that's being done on the other side of the aisle.
So what can we do to kind of help
so what I would
develop
be doing
that
is
language?
I would be reaching out to the Speaker's office directly.
Okay.
And I would be asking that that the bill, if you are happy with having the study bill, having language be developed by DCP and those regulations drafted so that then the legislature can review it and look at 2020 for an implementation, then that's what you should do. If you think instead that there's been enough evidence out there through a variety of means, and that you feel strongly that legalization should happen in Connecticut now, then that's a different message that you can send to the speaker.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Very good.
Are you finding that your fellow legislators need more information? Like, is it that, like, to help to craft that language that is needed?
You know, I think that if you could get more details exactly about what's going on in Massachusetts,
we got that.
Specifically the regulations that they are going to be enacted this summer, you know, no hype, just, hey, here's the facts, here's what Massachusetts is going to be looking at this summer. I think that probably would be very helpful for legislators. I will say the Marijuana Policy Project has been doing a great job lobbying here at the Capitol.
Yes.
I've been in constant communication with them. They are very effective. They have vote counts that they are doing, and they are identifying legislators that maybe might need some additional information, and I would be working with those advocates as well.
Oh, yes, we are. We work very heavily with Sam Tracy. Real quick, before
this is Becky. This is Marijuana Policy Project. This is Becky Diemski.
Becky. Yeah, Becky.
Yeah,
she's a great person.
We met her the other
very
night,
good.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, she came to our normal meeting last week. We'd love to have you come out sometime. We have a convention coming up on May 5th. We'd love to have you speak to, our people here because it's great.
Oh, I would love that, but until we're out of session, I doubt you're going to get any legislators down there until after May 9th. And my first role is the state budget, so I unfortunately am kind of out of commission until we get through our legislative session.
Well, with that in mind, for sure, we thank you for taking time to call in today. And
yes, thank you.
Yeah, real quick, I wanted to mention you have another campaign going on. Aren't you
I
trying?
do.
Yeah, I wanted to give you a little plug for this November.
Yes.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Yes, I'm running for state senate in the 33rd district. It's the 12 towns along the Connecticut River Valley from Portland and East Hampton and Colchester to the north, all the way down to Long Island Sound, Old Saybrook, Westbrook, and Clinton. And I would love to have some support from folks. I think it's important that people know that, I'm a different kind of Republican and socially very accessible and support a lot of the efforts. I just like to be very fiscally prudent with your tax dollars. So I hope I can get some support.
Well, we appreciate that.
How can people get in touch with you, to learn more about your campaign and what you're about?
I appreciate that. My last name is spelled a little odd, so nobody really knows how to pronounce it. It's again Melissa Zebron. It's spelled Z as in zebra, IOBRON. And if you use the hashtag CTSenate33 or Google my name, you'll find me. I'm very active on social media, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and I would love the support.
Okay.
Hi.
Well,
Awesome.
Great. You've got ours. You've convinced us.
Yes, very much so.
All right.
Well, thank you. I look forward to seeing you guys, and I hope we can get together after session is over.
Okay.
Yes,
we'll
I look
see you up
forward
there.
to
We'll
that.
be up there next week.
Thank you so much for calling in.
You're welcome.
Have a good day.
Take care
and good
now.
luck
Bye-bye.
with everything. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. That was a nice conversation with
She's
a
always so
representative. That was
pleasant.
really great with them being in session. Take the time out to give us a call. That was really good. We have two good conversations today. Well, let's talk about what's going. Oh, and by the way, you're listening to the Cannabis Corner Show on WNHHLP 103.5 FM, broadcasting live from downtown New Haven. We're streaming live on TuneIn Radio and NewHavenIndependent.org. We're also streaming live video on Facebook Live. Just go to facebook.com, New Haven Independent, or go to your Facebook page and look us up. All right, real quick, we only got a couple minutes left before we're off. I wanted to go over what's going on this week. Big hearing tonight in New Haven. New Haven might actually have a resolution to legalize cannabis. So that is over at Yale on Orange Street at the House of Records. We also have, let's get to the big ones.
Yeah, the conference.
Conference. May 5th and May 3rd are the two next big dates. May 3rd is the Science Center. You want to go to that? May 5th is the conference at the Omni. Yeah. This is very big for the state of Connecticut. It is our first ever cannabis conference. If you want to get into the industry, if you want to learn about the plant, if you want to learn about the medical side, we're covering all aspects. We're going to have some great vendors there. We're going to be selling products. We're going to have some
Products
workshops.
like, yes,
Yeah, products, good CBD products. We're going to have some great workshop speakers. Jonathan Harris, the gubernatorial candidate, will be there.
Our keynotes
right.
are Chanel Lindsay from Ardent Cannabis in Massachusetts, an advocate in Massachusetts that helped push their legalization bill forward.
She's on the commission.
Yep. Dashita Dawson, she is the owner of MJM Strategies and is a mover and shaker and influencer in the cannabis industry. And as Joe said, Jonathan Harris, who used to run the reason why he's the keynote is for many reasons. We like him, and he's a great guy, but also because he used to run the Connecticut medical marijuana program as the commissioner of the DCP. So he'll have a lot of insight on regulatory related issues. So it's really important that people come to this conference. It is really happening.
We're having a lunch.
We really are building an industry here.
The whole day is only $60. You get classes,
it's
like
amazing,
mini classes, workshops, seminars,
and you get
free
to
lunch.
Interact with entrepreneurs and cannabis influencers in the state and ask questions. There's going to be feedback opportunities where you can talk to an industry insider about your business or what you want to do, and they'll give you guidelines and feedback. So it's a really great opportunity.
Okay.
So we need to have people come on May 5th.
May 5th. Well, that's ctcannabisconvention.com or ctcannabisconference.com for tickets. And we will see you next week on Cannabis Corner.
Yes.
Call your legislators. Call our Simowitz.
Yep.
Tell him you want to bring cannabis to a vote. Polls, not tolls. Thank you.
Have a great night, guys.
Deuces.
That was very interesting.
What you meddling, you can say what you peddling, cause they can easily influence. I'm about to take another long drive, cause it helped me get a clear mind. So while you staring at your watch, I'll be looking at the sun, yeah, I'm moving on real. I used to wish that I was here now, smooth sailing on my own boat, about to jump up on another plane, right before I take another tow. I used to wish that I was here now, smooth sailing on my own boat, about to jump up on another plane, right before I take another tow. I used to wish that I was here now, smooth sailing on my own boat, about to jump up on another plane, right before I take another tow. I used to wish that I was here now, smooth sailing on my own boat, about to jump up on another plane, right before I take another tow. I always knew that I'd be here now, standing on his own too. A move I make is real humble. That's exactly what a man do. You playing games and you only get one turn, so I'm moving on the low too. In the game, roll a whole gram up in the backwood. No, you got roll too. I used to wish that I was there now, jumping off another plane, stepping foot on another planet, resurrected, but they call me by the same name. So if you know me like your chalice, or you could put it in a blunt too, all praise to the Most High, cause that's exactly what I am too. I used to wish that I was here now, smooth sailing on my own boat, about to jump up on another plane, right before I take another tow. I used to wish that I was here now, smooth sailing on my own boat, about to jump up on another plane, right before I take another tow. I used to wish that I was here now, smooth sailing on my own boat, about to jump up on another plane, right before I take another tow. I used to wish that I was here now, smooth sailing on my own boat, about to jump up on another plane, right before I take another tow.
When I left my father's house, I was well supplied. I made mistakes and I done wrong, now I'm dissatisfied.